Where does this plug in from?
Oh, on that side.
Okay.
Can't wait for that. Loudspeaker. Okay. Good morning, everyone. We'll start off with a chant. If you know the chant, just chant along. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Avir Avir Maeti Rudrayate Dakshina Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. O Lord, guide us through and through, and ever protect us with thy loving presence. Om, peace, peace. Peace to all beings everywhere. Well, happy belated Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this holiday and being grateful for whatever the divine has given us, and recognizing that. Today's topic will be on serving the divine in human beings. The last time I came here, I spoke about I had just gone to Harvard Divinity School on a one-year scholarship and had studied spiritual counseling and chaplaincy. So this past year, I actually worked as a chaplain intern in a posting called CPE. It's a chaplain pastoral experience, where you take classes, about 5 hours of classes per week. You have online classes as well. You work 16 hours in a hospital. I was working at UCSD in the Hillcrest branch. And there, I was serving patients as a chaplain intern. And the first patient I remember going into, I shadowed one of my Christian chaplain. And I remember the first patient we saw was someone who, their son had overdosed on fentanyl, and they were dying. The mother had to make a decision. Do I want my son to remain a vegetable, or do I want to pull the plug? And they went, and she was asking the chaplain, what should I do? She was saying that if Christ can perform miracles, why can't he perform a miracle on my son? The next week, I had gone into, we have a place, a second floor, where we have a special unit called the burns, for burn patients. And you'd see a 6-month-old baby who has third-degree burns. And the young parents were there, just overwhelmed with emotions. And you'd find that, the grandparent had accidentally spilled coffee on the child. There's nothing they can do. So it's a case where these are overwhelming situations. How do you handle these things? So it got me thinking about today's topic, about how do you serve the divine in human beings? What does it mean to serve the divine in human beings? As a practice, can I just get a show of hands? How many of you try to make this a practice, serving God in human beings? Okay, quite a few, yeah. And you may hear that sometimes the Swamis have told us, well, before you think about the people you're going to serve as God, somewhere in the action, you try to think of God, and at the end, you offer whatever you've done, the fruits of your action, to God. It's a general way. Well, today we're going to explore this in a deeper way. Serving the divine in human beings is part of karma yoga, a practice that can help us realize the divine. So we're going to explore that. And to get to this, there's a concept you may have know in our Ramakrishna order. Oh, I forgot. So before we begin, I think, this is part of actually a retreat that we had done about self-care and service. And I just want to mention one thing. In order to serve people, you yourself have to maintain a certain degree of health and fullness. If you are not feeling good, you'll not be able to serve the people in the best of your ability. So just briefly, what I'm going to say here is that there's an acronym that I'd come up with some time ago. It's called Take Your Meds. Do you know what MED stands for? Okay, M. Anybody want to guess?
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness, I can use that also good, but meditate. So every day you want to do these, you want to take your meds. You want to meditate, E stands for?
Exercise.
Exercise, correct. D stands for? Diet. S stands for?
Sleep.
Sleep and support. These two must go hand in hand. If you do this every day, you'll be feeling at an optimal level where you could serve to the best of your ability. Okay. So that's just to summarize what we mean by self-care. And if you do self-care, then you can properly do what we call seva. Now, the concept, the concept I'm talking about here in our Ramakrishna order is Shiva Jnani Jiva Sheva. Serving the divine as Shiva, as God. Serving humans as God. This concept originally came from Sri Ramakrishna. So we're going to explore this origination of where this concept came from. Sri Ramakrishna was, sometime in 1884, Ramakrishna was talking about the Vaishnava tradition. And he mentioned 3 salient points in the Vaishnava tradition. The first one he mentioned was that Name Ruchi, which means that you should have love for God's name. You should develop a taste for God's name, knowing that when you chant God's name and God, they are one and the same. The second thing he said was that you should have Vaishnava Sevan. You should serve the devotees of God as if they're God themselves. The third point he said was Sarva Jiva Daya. You should have sympathy for all beings. You should understand that this world belongs to God, and all the things belonging to it, you should have sympathy for it. When he said this, Sarva Jiva Daya, he went in samadhi. Now, this concept of daya, Swami Jagadananda, in the Great Master, translates it as compassion. But I feel, if you look at it in today's context, with today's psychological understanding, you'll get a better understanding of this term, meaning sympathy. So that's how I'm going to translate it, and I'll explain it, why I'm doing this. So, Ramakrishna comes out of samadhi, and what does he say? He says, Daya, sympathy for all beings. How foolish to speak of sympathy. Human beings are as insignificant as worms crawling on the earth. And they are to show sympathy to others? That's absurd. It must not be sympathy, but compassionate service to all. Recognize all as manifestations of God and serve them as such. As chaplains, we're trained to try to feel the emotion underneath the words. And as I read this, the sense that I get is he's going from a sense of being annoyed. And it starts to deepen. Sympathy for all. How foolish to speak of sympathy. He starts to get peeved until he finally ends in irritation. My question to you is, why do you think Ramakrishna was irritated when this mention of daya, of sympathy to all beings came to his mind? Well, in order to understand, let's understand what sympathy means in comparison to compassion. So there's a video by Dr. Sinclair who's going to help us explain this.
Sympathy, empathy, compassion. These three words often get used synonymously, but there are some important differences. When you think of compassion in particular, what comes to mind? How is it different or similar to sympathy and empathy? It can be tricky to tell between them to begin with, but knowing what compassion really is crucial when researching these topics. Here at the Compassion Research Lab, we've conducted extensive research on compassion. We've looked long and hard at what it is and how it differs from sympathy and empathy. We did this by reviewing the scientific literature and by speaking with patients directly about their experiences. Both the literature we reviewed and the patients we spoke to gave us a comprehensive understanding of the true nature of compassion. To illustrate, let's imagine you're a patient recently diagnosed with cancer. Your outlook is good, but you're worried. On top of all of this, it's happened right in the middle of a big move. Hearing about this, you noticed your family, friends, co-workers, and healthcare providers all react in different ways. Oh my goodness, that sounds awful. Are you going to be okay? I'm so sorry. It must be horrible. Thinking of you, this is sympathy. It's a pity-based response based on a lack of understanding. It makes people say things that make them feel better, but it doesn't do much for you. Then there are others that try to understand what it would be like for them if they were in your situation by trying to feel what you are feeling. They tell you that they know what you're going through. They imagine what it would be like for them to be in your shoes. They might tell you that they have gone through something similar. This is empathy. It makes you feel heard, understood, and a bit better about your situation. But then there are those who try to really understand what it is like for you to feel what you feel, and who aren't afraid to suffer with you and to do something to help. They actively listen, they're kind, they're loving, and they genuinely seek to understand you and your unique needs. But then they go one step further and show up on the weekend to help out with the big move. They haven't said they feel sorry for you, they haven't just understood you. They have been selfless and done something to help. They aren't afraid to engage you in your suffering. They understand you and what you actually need, not just what they would want if they were in your shoes. Most important of all, they actually do something to improve your situation. That is compassion. Sympathy, empathy, and compassion may seem similar, but for those experiencing suffering, the differences are obvious and impactful. Patients told us that sympathy was unwelcomed and unhelpful. They told us that empathy was better because it attempted to understand what it would be like to be in another person's shoes. But compassion took things to the next level by understanding and addressing a patient's needs in a personalized manner, not just through words or feelings, but by putting their ego aside and by getting their hands dirty in order to actively engage and alleviate a person's suffering.
So why Ramakrishna was irritated was because he didn't like this sense of sympathy, a sense where you're above, looking below at the person, helping in that sense, where you feel that you should be grateful to me for helping you. The sense that it's a pity-based response, where the response is really not doing much for the person receiving it, but it's about me feeling better about myself, that I've said something. Compared to a compassionate service response, which here we talk about feeling from the heart, identifying with the pain and suffering of the person that you're serving, and then doing something about it. Here, what Ramakrishna meant by compassion was a warm-hearted concern that unfolds when we witness the suffering of others and feel motivated to relieve it through action. And I feel a real good example of who has done this is there's a Swami called Swami Muktananda, who was in Benares, in Varanasi in India. And he used to work in the hospital there. One of the jobs he used to do in the hospital was he would actually serve the patients as God. He would actually then sponge all the patients, give them sponge baths, heat up their food, and serve them. As he was serving the patients, he noticed one patient was asleep. And he, instead of waking him up, he just sat next to the patient. As he sat next to the patient, he started noticing that his body was getting very tired and hungry. He thought to himself that the body hasn't eaten since 7:30 in the morning. But he said, but I cannot leave because the patient Narayana, the God in this patient, needs me. So he waited till the patient woke up. When the patient woke up, he warmed up his food, he served him, and as the patient was eating, the patient looked down and said, Swami, you yourself haven't eaten. My own family members don't serve me like this. They just both looked into each other's eyes, and tears started streaming from both their eyes in this joyfulness. This is an act of compassion. And what Ramakrishna, why he got so angry when he said, sympathy for others? You're just worms. Who are you to show sympathy? Was because he wanted to eliminate the egotism of the giver. He wanted to eliminate the sense of superiority complex, that the person is dependent on you, that you feel you're the savior. I'm the one with the answers. I can fix you, and this is how you do it. He wanted to eliminate the sense of power that the giver feels, that I'm looking down upon the person, the receiver. I'm calling the shots. I'm the expert. You should listen to me because I have something to offer you. Look how magnanimous I am. He wanted to eliminate the sense of pride and prestige that the giver senses. I'm such a good person. Look, I serve my parents. I'm such a good boy. He wanted to eliminate the sense of entitlement that the giver feels. You owe me. After all I've done for you, show me some gratitude. Where's the love? You can get a sense of this about, like, for example, someone who's about 10 feet away and you're holding the door. And when the person walks through the door and doesn't say thank you, doesn't even acknowledge you, how do you feel? We all do this. There's a sense that we come in wanting to do something altruistic, unselfish. But then there's a deeper sense of pain and suffering that we feel, but there's some other motive there. I'll give you another example. Sometimes we have devotees who cook and they want to offer food for the Lord. Afterwards, they want the Swami to taste it. Now, there's some situations where the Swami may not be able to get to the food, and then they feel angry or irritated that the Swami didn't try their food. How does that make you feel? How does it make you feel if you're doing something for someone unselfishly, maybe making Thanksgiving supper, getting the whole house ready, and then the person calls and says, I'm sorry, I can't make it. I'm going to go to a Dodger game instead. How does it make you feel? So sometimes we realize that we think we're being compassionate, but underneath it, we're really being sympathetic. I'll give you another example here. Last summer, my parents, my mother had surgery, and she had a shoulder replacement. And I remember that I was serving as a chaplain for the past year. I'm also serving as a chaplain this year. I'm thinking, oh, I can help serve my parents, no problem. So I ended up going for about several weeks to my parents' house. And there I saw my father had really grown old. He had slowed down, and I noticed that his eyesight, his sense of just everything had slowed down. So I thought, no problem, I'll take care of everything. So I wanted to arrange everything. And I'd end up forcing my father, say, hey, Dad, we got to get ready. Let's go see Mom. You got to get ready by this time. Cooking, forcing my dad to thinking that my dad should eat this type of food. So this is what he should be eating. Starting to do everything, becoming in control of everything. And within 1 week, I started getting some pushback. My dad was telling me, listen, who are you? I've been taking care of myself for so many years, and now you think you just come here and take over everything? No. And I remember the sense of feeling unappreciated. The sense that I felt like Arjun in the battlefield, where every morning I had good intentions, but at the end of the day I felt wiped out. We just started clashing. Then I started realizing, was I serving his needs? Or was I serving my own need? I started recognizing that I wasn't serving my father's need, his need for respect, his need for dignity, his need for autonomy. So instead of making demands, I started making requests. I started asking him that, Dad, I noticed that, you have an appointment this morning. Would you like me to drive? Or, Dad, today is Tuesday. What would you like to eat? In this way, I started to came across that and we're serving, we want to give the person a sense of dignity, a sense of they're not a burden to us, and a sense of self-confidence. This is compassionate seva. Hafiz wrote a poem, and the poem is this. It says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. So why Ramakrishna was so irritated was because he wanted to give the idea of the person who was receiving help. He wanted to put them up to be worthy of receiving worship. And the person who's giving to be humble to see the greatness of that person they were serving. This was the idea that I feel Ramakrishna had meant by not daya, but seva. Not sympathy, but compassionate service. Before I go, and I just want to, how is that processing with you guys? Anybody have an example of what this has meant to them?
At work, that's the best example I can give. I have a team of 11 people, and we support the entire office. And I think that also, this idea of being sympathetic to what they're dealing with in a time of crisis like a deadline, versus actually being hands-on and being available to help them in the time of crisis so that they can resolve their issue. It's something that I would like to really explore with my team.
So it sounds like being present.
Being proactive.
Proactive.
Reactive.
Right.
And being present.
Wonderful.
That's the first thing. That's why I've been making notes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any example they'd like to share? Okay, so this is the idea that Ramakrishna had stated. Now, in this conversation, guess who was there? Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda came out of that insight of Ramakrishna. This is what he said. He said, what a wonderful light I saw today. The words of the Master, in the words of the Master. And what I'm going to tell you is that what Swami Vivekananda did is he took Ramakrishna's compassionate service and brought it to the emphasis of service as a worship. Service, making it from man-centered to God-centered. And what he said was this. He said, what a wonderful light. Wow, we don't have to retire to the forest. We don't have to practice tapasya in the caves. We can stay right here. We don't have to renounce love, our friends and families. we can stay right here and serve God in all the embodied beings and get mukti, get liberation that way. What he went on to say was this. He gives us a template for how to serve God and human beings. He said this, let man do everything he's doing. There's no harm in that. It is sufficient for him, first, to be fully convinced that it is God that exists, manifested before him as the universe and all beings in it. What he's saying here is that God exists right now in front of you as all these embodied beings. There is a quote from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Ekoham bhuyasam prajayayeti. I am one. Let me express myself as many, and let me be embodied in all these human forms, in all these embodied forms. It's telling us that every one of us is God in that sense. Vivekananda used to say, my God is the God who is the wicked, the miserable, the poor. That is who I want to worship. Then he goes on to say, those in whom he comes in contact with every moment of his life, who he loves, respects, honors, and shows kindness, are all he himself. If you can look upon all people in the world as Shiva, first of all, here he's telling us, how do you serve God? If you can show love, if you can give respect, if you can give honor, shraddha, if you can see that they have all the knowledge, all the power in whom you're serving, just like a coach does to an athlete, I believe in you. With that type of conviction, if you have that belief, and if you show that kindness, then that is Shiva right in front of you. And if you can do that, then how can there be any regard to have anger, hatred, arrogance, or even being kind? If you can serve the Jiva as Shiva, your heart will be purified. And you will experience Ishvara. You'll be pure, awake, and free. This is what Vivekananda said. So, the next thing here I'd like to ask is that he's setting the template for us. How to serve God in human beings. Now, how do we do this? How do we make this practical? Well, I'm going to equate here, serving God and human beings is similar to serving God in the temple. Puja and Shaiva. And they both have 3 steps to this. In puja, what do? There's a sense of purification or preparation. There's a sense of engagement, the actual acts of offering. And then there's a sense of surrender. Similarly, when you serve a human being as God, there's also a sense of purification, letting go of anything that came up previously. Engagement. What are your acts of offering in the worship you're doing to the person you're serving? And also surrender, processing all that has come up and letting go of the fruits. So in the sense here, for preparation, the preparation here is the template that before you come, and let me make one thing clear here also. This is a practice. When I talk about serving God in a human being, it doesn't mean just having a general attitude like, I'm going to serve all people as God, and I'm just going to go through the day with this type of attitude. It doesn't work like this. A practice means something that you're going to practice for a given set of time. Just like we do puja for the 1 hour, or for however long you guys do it. Just like you do meditation for maybe 15 minutes to 20 minutes to an hour. Same thing. You're going to make a direct conscious effort. I'm going to try to worship the divine in this person. And let me tell you one thing. Start off with someone you are you're less intimate with. I know from my own personal experience, it's much harder to serve those that you have close relationships with because they bring up all the triggers within you. Also, your sense of expectation is greater. So it's better to start with people. It's so much easier to work at a hospital, serve at a hospital, than serving my parents at home. That's the advanced course. So let's begin with something simple. Strangers, okay? And to begin with, then, you need a sense of preparation. So my suggestion is that you need to have already a base of spiritual practices in the beginning. You need to have your meditation in the morning. You need to take your meds, all right? Have a sense of reflection, prayer. Have that as your foundation. The whole point of this is that by doing this, you're going to get a sense of spaciousness within yourself, a sense of, what we call detachment, so that when you serve the people, especially your loved ones, you don't get triggered so easily. You don't overreact. You don't make a 1 into a 10. So the idea here is that, in the sense when preparation, is that you want to tune yourself into the divine within yourself. You want to get centered before you actually go into the actual engagement of serving the person you're going to serve. You want to get grounded. Why this is important? I'll tell you why it's important. When I was in the hospital, this happened a couple weeks ago, I was with a patient who had metastatic cancer. Cancer had spread all throughout his body. And I remember I was in there, it was the second visit I had with the person. I was there, and I had, the first time he was Catholic. I had given him a picture of Christ. He was so excited to see this. He had about 2 weeks to live. He put the picture up on his wall. We started talking a little bit about his religion, what it meant to him. So the next time I came back, I was really excited to go meet him and explore some of the things that he wanted to talk about. As we started the conversation, he had low energy, and he had a sense of anxiety. As I was trying to talk to him, there was another patient with the curtain that was on the other side. The TV was loud. I was not really able to hear the patient very well. And as we were talking, I noticed that his energy level was going less and less. And I had this sense I just wanted to help cheer him up a little bit. But there was nothing doing. There was this heaviness, a sense of sadness. And I felt a sense of frustration just because of the whole dynamics. So I left saying the Lord's Prayer, and then I left. And I had to go to the next patient. But I had this sense of heaviness, this sense of incompleteness, this sense of unfulfillment. I had to get rid of this before I met in with the next patient. So when you're doing seva for someone, serving God, you want to make sure the puja, the first part of puja is purification. You're purifying your body and mind, burning up all the past karmic experiences, giving you a clean slate, like a white palette. So just because of lack of time, a simple way to do that is, discovered, is having a grounding meditation technique. Something as simple as just breathing, feeling the tension. It could be like doing a little body scan, feeling into your feet, beginning with your feet, sensing if there's any tension there, and breathing into the tension, and then exhaling out, release. Breathing into your legs, breathing into the tension you're sensing into the legs, and then breathing out, release. Some simple type of grounding technique so that it wipes away a little bit about what you've experienced in the previous. The second thing I would suggest is that you want to invoke, in puja we talk about not only purification but invoking the presence of God. So one way of doing that is visualizing the divine in your heart. And you could breathe into that, visualizing brighter, the luminosity of the divine in your heart. And maybe even chanting a mantra. And with every prayer of the mantra, you're asking for God's wisdom. Om Namah Shivaya. Asking for God's light. Om Namah Shivaya. Asking for God's, grace. that light, the wisdom that's going to help you be an instrument. Because a lot of times you're going to find when you're meeting with people you're serving, you don't know what to say. So you're trying to tap into that divine power as a channel to work through you. The other thing then is that as you do this, you start to feel more and more when you're tapping into that divine power. And then you start to interact with the patient. You start to notice that you don't want to meet the patient meeting your needs. What I mean by here is that, let me get back to this. Okay. So as you feel more and more this divinity within yourself, there's a saying in puja, Devam Bhutva Devam Yajet. To worship the divine, you have to become divine. So for you to recognize God in the person you're serving, you first have to recognize God in yourself. The next thing that you should probably do is do a sankalpa. A sankalpa is an intention. What's your intention when you're going to be serving this person? You may want to, you have to really examine. I gave an example. When I was serving that person, the one who was the patient who had metastatic cancer, I noticed that I wanted that person to feel better. I noticed that I wanted that person to feel cheerful. Did I have an agenda before I came to meet that patient? Here, a sankalpa could be something like this. You could say, "Oh Mother, today I have to serve, but please see to it that what I do is in accordance with your will. I have limited knowledge of what I should do in this situation. I can't see the ends of my actions. So you please see to it that what I do is for the welfare of the patient or the person I'm serving and myself." Here you want to eliminate that subtle feeling of needing to be seen when we're serving the patient. As I'm talking to you right now, is there a subtle sense within me looking for acknowledgement? Within you guys, are there nodding of heads? Am I looking for affirmations? Am I playing into that? In the same way, when we serve someone, are we playing into their own emotions, looking for affirmations for ourselves? Are we needing to be, do we have holes in our own ego where the reason I'm serving is to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel accepted? Just like the people that serve the Swamis. Am I doing it for God, or am I doing it for a subtle sense of my own egotism? When you tap into the divine yourself, you become purna, you become full. And in that sense, when you feel this fullness and you're plugged into the divine, then you're serving out of unconditional love. You're not looking for that person to fill your needs. So it's important to understand, what is my intention in my service here? The next step here is recognizing the divine in the person we're serving. We now feel ourselves to be divine. The person we also, for this to become seva, to a worship, we have to know that we're serving God herself. So you have to start getting a conviction that who you're serving is the divine embodied in this human form. And there's some ways you could do that. Bon Bihari Maharaj, the Swami I mentioned earlier, he used to call each patient Narayana. So he'd say, "This is Bob Narayana," or he may be Sarah Narayana. He'd associate God with that name and form. God has come down in this person in this name and form. One other doctor I talked to would actually subtly, before entering the patient's room, would touch the patient's feet, acknowledging the divine in that person. And for us, it could be as simple as namaste. The divine in me salutes the divine in you. So in some way, you have to start getting conviction that who I am serving is the divine embodied in this form. Now, after all that, we get to the actual engagement of what are our acts of offering. In puja, you'll notice that we offer flowers, candles, incense. This is our adoration for the divine, for God, and we're showing our love to the divine. What is the way that we can worship the divine? Well, let me just give you one example, again, back to Bon Bihari Maharaj. He used to say that one day, Vana Baba told us how service can be turned into worship. Vana Baba replied, "It is true that I cannot go to Lord Vishnunath in the temple, but I don't regret that I can't worship him anymore." For instance, when in Narayana, when God comes in the form of a patient for me to care, I pour saline water or hydrogen peroxide on this wound, and I think I'm pouring water on Lord Shiva. After that, I apply some ointment, and I think I'm offering sandal paste to the Lord. Then I place gauze, and as if I'm placing a bilva leaf. And finally, I do japa, wrapping the bandage, and brother, I get immense joy doing this. So, in the act of serving another human being, what are we offering to that person we are serving? You're going to say something?
Unconditional love.
Okay, love, yes, that's one thing, yes. So what I discovered is that in chaplaincy, there are 4 things that we do, which I feel that every person can use as they're serving a person. One is presence, the act of listening, empathy, and self-awareness. And I'm just going to briefly explain these things because our time is a little bit limited here. But what I mean by presence here is that it's holding a compassionate, loving space for the person you are serving. Here, by presence, is bringing the fullness of your being to the person you're deeply engaging with. You come into the patient's room, whoever you're serving, turn off the cell phones, turn off all the devices, as if you're walking into the temple. Your full attention is going to be tuned into the patient, into the Lord. You want to feel a sense of softness, relaxedness. You want to feel a sense of acceptance, non-judgmentality, because what the person is going to pour into you, you want to be receptive to. You don't want to stop the patient from pouring out, opening up their heart to you. And that may come by a sense of like interrupting them. It may come by a sense of being judgmental to what they're saying. It may come by a sense of wanting to fix something that they're saying. No. Here, you're being the compassionate presence of the divine Atman, Brahman, the ocean of existence, and allowing them just to pour into that space as much and as fully as they can. So when they start to cry, it's not about taking the tissues and putting out the tears as if they're fires. Allow that. When you read the life of Holy Mother, when people started crying in her presence, she would never say, "Don't cry." She'd let the fullness of those tears come out as if it's fully being poured out. You want to read also into the body language. You want to be present. With whatever, not the emotions that are being signaled. So allowing them to pour. This is presence. Creating sort of a sense of, as I think Mother, a womb of safety, of security, of being heard. I tell you that this is probably the number one thing I feel that most people want. Swami Swahanandaji, in one of these videos, talked about, he said, as spiritual people, we really can't serve people spiritually. We really, even what can we do mentally? But what we can do is learn to listen. That itself is a great act. So in that sense, an act of listening also is part of that sense where you are just being, where you're really just learning to summarize, to really just feeling that all the answers lie within that person. In Vedanta, we believe that all light, all knowledge lies within you. So what are we doing as chaplains? What are we doing when we're serving that person? We're just being a mirror to that person, allowing them to come out, to be able to bring out all the things that are inside, see it, and then they start making the connections. They start bringing up the answers. All you're doing is providing space and being present and listening with curiosity, with wonder, so that the person feels like they're really being heard. Giving attention. Empathy we've talked about. So I'll get to self-awareness. But when all this happens, when all this is happening, guess what happens? Well, as you're doing this, as for example, when I was with my father, trying to serve present, in puja, after I do the worship, usually people are feeling joyful. There's a sense of intimacy, this upasana. You feel like you got closer and closer to the one you love, to the divine. And this prasad that you served, you feel like, oh, you're getting this food back. What happens when you serve another human being? What?
Serving in front of God.
You're serving, but what's the after effect you feel?
Joy.
You feel peace? You feel joy? Well, you are very lucky, all right? When I felt serving my father, I wasn't feeling peace. I wasn't feeling joy. I had anger arising within me. I had all these difficult feelings coming up, being triggered. It is not easy when you're serving the divine in another. I went to a patient who was a Jewish patient, and my intention there was to serve that person, and it was Hanukkah. All I wanted was to make sure they had everything they need, from the food to any scriptures to anything. I stood there and asked him, and the person asked me a question on Judaism. I didn't know the answer, and then that patient got furious at me. And I remembered I tried staying in there, trying to serve, and I remembered then what happened was that the longer I stayed, the more furious he got. And my job, I should have left after 5 minutes. I stayed 35 minutes and got all burnt up. So, what happens? I'll tell you in a story. It's called the Samudra Mantana. There's a story, it's an Indian epic, where the gods and the demons get together, and they've heard that there's this amrita, this beautiful nectar in the bottom of the ocean. And so what do they? They want to get this eternal amrita, to make them eternal, to feel this joy. So what happens? They get this snake, and they start churning the water of the ocean. Back and forth, there's a tug of war going on. In this churning process, what happens? Several things come up. Before this amrita comes up, one of the things that comes up was this hala hala. This hala hala is a black poisonous substance. It starts to come up, and it starts to suffocate both the gods and the demons. And as they're suffocating, they start to yell to Shiva, "Help us, help us, help us." And Shiva comes. And what does he do? He opens up his mouth, and he consumes this black poisonous of the hala hala. He neither digests it so that it impacts him and he feels affected by the poison, neither does he spit it out so that it infects others as gossip or anything like that. He just holds space for it. He holds space in his throat. It's called a Nilkanta, the blue-throated one. In the same way, when we try to serve others, there's going to be gems. I can't tell you also, there's a lot of gratitude I get from patients. But there's also the hala hala that comes up. Sri Ramakrishna calls this the sat ripu. There's the 7 elements: jealousy, anger, hatred, jealousy. All this comes up from the bottom of your heart. Remember, Vivekananda says earlier, he says that If you can see God in this person, serve God in this person, then you will not feel anger, you will not feel jealousy, you will not feel hatred, not even kindness. Who is that? Who's he referring to? He's referring to a realized soul. In the meantime, we are trying to serve, and the hala hala is coming out of us, and we have to know how to deal with that. This is purifying our heart. Vivekananda says, your heart will be purified. This is the churning of the mind is bringing up all the stuff. It is a necessary part for the purification to occur. So when you tell me that, oh, I feel really lousy, I feel really angry, I feel of when I tried to serve this person, I say, that's great. That's part of the purification happening. Otherwise, it's just embedded in you. You see through it, you don't see it. Because once you can start to see it, now you can start to do something about it. So it's now about, so in the last few minutes, what I want to talk about here is then, what I want to talk about is this self-awareness. So when this hala hala comes out, what do we do with it? Let me talk a little bit about that. How do we digest that? Okay, I'm going to give you one and why is it important to digest it? Why is it important to do this? Because when these feelings come up, if you don't deal with them, if you suppress them, repress them, what's going to happen is you're going to develop emotional toxicity within your system. You may start to feel fatigue, irritability. You have a lack of enthusiasm. You start to be cynical. This is all undigested hala hala emotions that have arisen within you, but you don't want to deal with, so you push them down. The other way of doing it is expressing it. But you may express it in unhealthy ways by expressing it towards others in ways of anger, in ways that will create more deeper samskaras. So you have to know how to deal with this. This is the purification of the heart that Vivekananda is referring to. And so one way here is called, we're taught in chaplaincy, called the ruler method. And the ruler method here basically is R, recognize your emotions. U, understand the causes of these emotions. L, label these emotions. E, express these emotions. And R, regulate or release these emotions. So R, the first thing here is, let's go back. So R is recognize the emotion. It's important to recognize this emotion here. And this emotion will show up as, this methodology was developed at Yale University. And in recognizing emotions, you have to understand, what am I feeling? Is this a pleasant or unpleasant experience that you're feeling in the body? Am I being energized in my experience, or am I being drained? Is my heart clenching, my stomach nodding? Every emotion that you experience has a physical correspondence in the body. And what we have to do is we have to learn to sense into our body to understand when there's a tightness occurring, what type of emotion this is expressing. Look at the facial expression, the physical gestures. Do you feel a constriction, a tightening, or do you feel a sense of freedom? You understand. Understand when you feel this way, why did this arise? To the best of your ability. What were you doing before this situation occurred? What might have caused this reaction? Who or what situation was present when you started to feel this way? L, label. Now, I cannot tell you how difficult this is. When you feel an emotion, well, I've gone to many retreats, and sometimes you have these co-ed retreats where we're asked, what are you feeling right now? You know what the majority of men say? Do you know what they think? What do you think they say? Huh? Good. No. When you ask them, it's as if they're going into the state that we call shushupti. What is shushupti? That dreamless sleep. It's the sense I'm aware of nothing. What are you feeling? I'm feeling nothing. That's what, and I'm in this camp also. We're not taught to be aware of what we're feeling internally. So a way to start to understand your emotion, simple way, is this. Here's a mood meter. It's called a mood meter. And the mood meter basically is based on two things, whether you're feeling pleasant and whether you're feeling energetic. So just a simple way to look at here is that if you're in this lecture right now and you're feeling maybe, how are you feeling? You may be feeling a low pleasantness, all right? Or you may be feeling pleasant but low energy. So maybe some of you are feeling peaceful, thoughtful, chill, calm, or at ease. That could be the way you're feeling now, right? If some of you are feeling a little bit more bored by what I'm saying, you're going to feel low pleasantness, also low energy. And you may be feeling maybe miserable, glum. You can feel like, what a waste of time. I'm feeling spent or lonely. If some of you drove here, and for example, were driving and got cut off while you're driving, you would feel high energy and you'd be feeling a sense of unpleasantness. And that may result in feeling of anxiousness, frustration, anger. And for example, after this, suppose you're going to a Dodger game or a Kirtan concert. You may feel high energy and high pleasantness. You start to feel excited, optimistic, or motivated, cheerful, energized. This is a way just to gauge what your sense of emotion is. And the way you want to do is, as you become more aware of what you're sensing, what you're feeling, you start to become more aware of the subtleties of the emotion. Before the emotion overwhelms you, what we call a soft emotion compared to an intense emotion. A soft emotion may be that you feel annoyed, irritated a little bit. An intense emotion is you feel anger, you're overwhelmed. So the idea here is before the emotion becomes intense and overwhelms you, you have to stop it when it's a soft emotion. Just try to understand. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling annoyed. It's part of the anger family. What's that telling me? Maybe it's telling me a boundary's been crossed to mine. I have to restore my boundary. Maybe I'm feeling sad. What's that information telling me? Maybe it's telling me that there's something I have to let go of to make room for something else. What is it that I'm holding on to that is causing me to feel sad? Maybe it's a feeling of fear, and that fear is arising within me, and it's giving me information that I have to be vigilant. What do I have to be vigilant about? So use these emotions as information to key in on yourself. Because when you're serving God in the human form, all this information is coming up within you. Another thing that makes it different from just doing puja. Puja, worshiping the God here, compared to puja, worshiping the human God. The human God is dynamic. You're going to be getting things prasad. You're going to be feeling that jealousy, anger, hatred. All these things are going to be coming up within you. You have to know how to navigate through this. How to release this. Coming to this last understanding. When you can feel it, label it, then you can express it. How do you identify the emotion when it comes up within you? Do you say when you're getting angry, I'm angry? If that's the way you feel, then that becomes a sense of identity. I am angry. And you can't do anything about it. You just feel that's the way I am. If you get a sense that I feel angry, then you get a sense that that feeling comes and goes. It's outside of me. The nice thing is when you can label an emotion, you bring it out of you. I've noticed that. Once you can identify the emotion, it comes out. It's like the object separates from the subject. The ghost that was inhabiting comes out. And now you could do something about it. Even just by calling it, creates a sense of withering away the power of that emotion. And the last thing then here is that is releasing it. So once you can recognize the emotion, once you can understand its causes, once you can label it, and once you can express it, then you can release it. And here what I mean by releasing is that Ramakrishna used to said, Mon Guru Thou, turn everything to me, to God. So some of our Swamis, what they do is that if they're feeling a sense of anger, they'll take the anger as a flower or a bell leaf, Om Namah Shivaya, and offer it to the feet of Shiva. Swaha, I offer it to you, Shiva. You who consumes all anger, restore my Amrita within me. Or if you don't visualize God in the sense of a divine being, you can visualize as the fire of consciousness. If you're feeling sadness, release that sadness into the fire of consciousness. Because the consciousness does not get impure. Whatever burned, fire doesn't get impure by whatever you offer it. It burns whatever is offered, and yet it remains untainted. So, in whatever way, you have to release this. Another thing, you can also do this as a prayer. Why prayer doesn't work in some ways is because we're not genuine. We're not really feeling it. Using the ruler method, you get an understanding of a sincere, heartfelt prayer. And then through that prayer, I offer it to you, Mother. Please help me with the difficulties I'm dealing with right now. In this process, feel it, label it, offer it. You know what Ramakrishna told Girish Ghosh? Girish Ghosh was this Bohemian devotee Ramakrishna. He told Girish Ghosh that you utter many abusive and vulgar words. It doesn't matter. It's better for these things to come out. There's some people who fall ill on account of blood poisoning. The more the poisoned blood finds an outlet, the better it is for them. You too will be pure day by day. People will marvel at you. Here, who are we releasing it to? Who are we expressing our emotions to? If we're expressing our emotions to God, it becomes dissolved. If we're expressing it to humans, it can create ramifications. So in this way, that the final thing, because we're out of time now, is that after all this, after your engagement, all that you've done, everything you've done, you want to offer it to God, the divine themselves. So in the Gita it says, by dedicating all your works to me, you'll be freed from the bondage of good and bad results. With your mind attached to me through renunciation, you'll be liberated and you will reach me. When you're doing this, and you're offering, so like if you feel this anger towards someone, and you use the ruler methodology, and then you're offering the sensations, that feeling to God, you may have to do this again and again and again. It's not a one-shot deal. I found sometimes I have to do it several times, but each time I do it, the emotion, the energy behind that emotion starts to become less and less and less. So finally, you can just see the person and not be triggered by the story you create with them. So this is basically, in summary, the idea of serving the divine in human beings. We've seen through Sri Ramakrishna the aspect of serving through compassionate action. And how Swami Vivekananda took that and then emphasized, we can take this serving of compassionate action, we can take this service and make it a worship. And by this worship, we can be free. And in this process, We offer 4 things: presence, we offer active listening, we offer empathy, and we also offer self-awareness. And through this process, this hala hala comes up. And all this hala hala gets offered back to the divine, God. And we become pure and pure as they go by. So this is the methodology here of what we mean by serving God in human beings. Thank you so much.
Changed his topic.
Oh, wait.
Okay, see if I can remember it. The inspiration of the Ramakrishna order will be Swami Sarvadivananda's topic next week. He changed it.
Next Sunday.
Yeah, next Sunday. Yeah.
Thank you to Swami Harinamananda for a very practical talk. We want to have you here a little more often. Like once in 2 years is not enough, brother.
Once a year.
Once a year, come a little more often. That'll be good for all of us. As you probably know, Swami Harinamananda stays at our San Diego center. It's a one Swami center. It's a small place, but it's beautiful. And if you're ever down there, please visit. We have refreshments outside. If this is your first time, most welcome. Bookshop is open. We have books and different traditions and gifts and all of that. And Swami Harinamananda will be going to the living room right next to the bookshop right after this for further discussion. And I also wanted to mention that today is a special day. We're celebrating the birthday of one of Ramakrishna's disciples, Swami Vijnanananda. That's why his picture is on the altar there, the extra picture on the bottom right. And that is he is the spiritual teacher of the previous head of this center, Swami Swahananda. So those of us who had our spiritual initiation through Swami Swahananda feel a direct connection also to our teacher's teacher, Swami Vijnanananda. So we're celebrating his day today.
Thank you. One thing I do want to mention here is that, remember I talked about invoking the presence before you're serving the patient? So one of the things we're also taught is about meditating on something that gives you a tenderness of heart before you meet the patient. So here, when I think of Holy Mother, and you read some of her interactions with different people, she seems to be like the perfect chaplain who just can sit in the presence of someone and allow them to pour out. And she says very few words, but her presence allows all these things to come out. And so when you think about her, it softens your heart. So before you come in and meet with the person or interact who you're serving, if you can soften your heart, what happens is your shields go down. The person feels more at ease with you. They will only pour out into you on the easiness they feel when in your presence. So one of the things is that you have to soften. You have to let your shields go. Then you have true heart-to-heart connection. And that's really what anybody really wants. You want to feel, you want to get through all, I'm going to call it the BS, and just really feel the presence of that person. And you know, when you're entering, serving another person, they're allowing you in a hospital, these patients, they allow you to enter into their most vulnerable situations. It is a sense of gift. We should feel a sense of gratitude when we're serving that person. Because in this thing, what we call hala hala, there are gifts coming up also. Why does God come in the form of this person for me to serve this person? Maybe the divine is telling me that in this encounter, you need to develop some titiksha, some patience, some forbearance. And I'm going to teach you that in this encounter. You need to develop some strength. Each encounter is a different lesson that the divine is presenting us, manifesting before us, to allow us to bring out something that we were lacking within. So that's why, think of Mother. Think of how grateful it is when you're doing this service. So thank you. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.